The digital world moves fast, but real growth comes from real conversations. This is eCoffee with Experts, where marketers and founders share what's actually working in SEO, AI, and digital growth. Grab your coffee and fuel your mind as we chat with top minds about their wins, struggles, and lessons you won't find in a blog post. Brought to you by Digital Web Solutions, we bring real talk to help you grow your business, one episode at a time. Let's get started.
Hey, hi everyone. Welcome to your show, eCoffee with Experts. This is your host, Ranmay here. And today we have Sam McEwin, who is the founder and director at BizWisdom agency with us. Hey, Sam, how's it going?
Very well. Thank you for having me on.
Lovely. Sam, before we move any forward, let's get to know more about you. Why don't you talk us through your journey? How did you land up in the SEO, the digital marketing space? And also about BizWisdom. What do you guys do? What do you guys specialize in? I know it's getting a long one now, but yeah, we'll take it from there.
Yeah, sounds good. So look, I've spent my, pretty much my entire career in digital marketing. I'm probably as old as a person who can possibly be to have spent their whole career in digital marketing. It was a new, exciting thing when I started. I started my career client side. So the long version of this story involves pains and effort I went to weasel my way into my first client side gig, only to have the horror of realizing that our marketing agency were the ones doing all the cool stuff I thought I'd be doing. So, but I spent a few years client side, which I think were really important in the end. I think it's probably a rarer pathway than most in agency land. I think most people in agency land have spent their careers in there. I haven't done their time client side. So I think it turned out to be useful. Once I was ready to move on from that role, I knew that I needed to switch over into agency land, and found myself in a very early sort of SEO and search marketing agency, which again was, pretty cool and exciting back then. And again, sort of spent a few years there and found some areas that I thought were really being underdeveloped in agencies. And I think probably from my background as a client side, realized that there was a lot of these early digital marketing agencies that didn't understand brand and didn't, offered an almost IT-like approach, I guess, to digital marketing, and realized that there was, at least at that time, a gap in the market. So, I took the plunge to start my own shop, and that was almost 13 years ago now, and then transitioned pretty quickly from, a search agency to social media advertising became a thing, and then also pivoting very, very early into programmatic advertising, which now has fueled, us playing in that programmatic space, which for us is podcast advertising, connected TV advertising, digital out of home, and, numerous other things. And that was always a big part of our promise, I guess, to our clients, was that, they won't outgrow us, and that for sure Google ads are powerful, SEO is really important, but that there's another side of advertising and marketing that you need to explore to be successful and to be a big brand and these kinds of things. And we can support that.
Nice. And, you have been, like you said, on the brand side, on the client side, and then, started your own agency. Were you an easy client for your agency?
I was a terrible client, but I like to think, well, maybe I use the excuse that it wasn't my fault. It was, I was very young. It was my first marketing role. And, and I think that the business that I worked for was it was a great business, and it was a, fairly large, powerful business. And, I think that organization was maybe a little guilty of, pushing their agency around a little bit. And as my first real professional job, I just adopted the culture of those above me. So, but that taught me a lot, I think, about agency services. My expectation of the agency then was that they were on call more or less 24 hours a day, that when I went home at 5:01, they'd be continuing to work until midnight that night, delivering the things that I needed them to deliver, that, and that if I called them, they'd answer, and that they deliver. Now, to their credit, they were an incredible agency, and again, a very early digital marketing agency. I'll give them a shout out. They're based here in Melbourne, Australia, called Citrus. I'm not sure if they're still around, to be honest, but they were an amazing agency back then, and that was a really good lesson, I think, and sitting on the other side of it, of clearly a lot of my expectations were unreasonable and unrealistic, but their ability to deliver on those was pretty outstanding, and it certainly illustrated to me what demanding clients expect of their agencies, and how how agencies should handle some of those sometimes unreasonable demands and often very high expectations.
I'm glad you appreciated them. I was about to ask, have you met a younger version of Sam McEwin now that you have your own agency?
Yeah, thankfully, probably not too often, but certainly I have. And I like to think that I have certain empathy for that. And certainly what I've tried to coach in my agency is that that's a level that our clients should be prepared to expect from us. Maybe we can't always deliver on, answering the phone at midnight or turning things around faster than they can be turned around. But, I think that understanding of the promise of an agency is that we have efficiencies, that we're experts, that we have some level of technical ability that doesn't exist within the businesses, the organizations that we work with, and that allows us to turn things around really quickly, and that allows us to do things to a really high standard. And that, there is an expectation that we'll work longer hours than our clients. And there is an expectation that if something is urgent for them, that we'll, work for midnight. And if we don't deliver on our promises, well, guess what? There's no HR department to save us. We're going to be fired, and we're going to be fired really quickly. And I think that's part of the appeal. That's why you hire an agency, right? Like they can deliver on some of those things.
Yeah. I mean, it's all hustle and hustle through and through, right? So and that is how an agency life looks like. I say this to my team, if you're not worried about a Monday, when you're going out on a Friday, not working in an agency, right? I mean, life cannot be normal or routine every day in an agency. Yeah. It's all hustle. I mean, if you are in an agency, and again, I mean, no disrespect to anything, but it's very, very difficult to go back and work in a corporate environment if you really like the hustle, because you're doing so many things at the same time and, kind of wearing multiple hats. It got its own fun, right? And it's not everyone's cup of tea.
That's right. And it's exciting. I think as an agency leader, there is a trade-off there. I think what I try to do is make my people aware that sometimes the job asks for some of these superhuman efforts. Of course, we're all humans. And we can't expect superhuman from our teams all the time. So I think, why would you work in an agency? I think it's got to be an exciting place. You do get to get your hands dirty. You get to work on really cool things. You get to push the boundaries. And also, I think you need a culture that, you can be yourself. This isn't a button-down corporate culture, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for, I think, the people who are attracted to agencies, their individualism is a really important part of that. And got to make there needs to be flexibility. And certainly from our point of view, if any of our team are, working into the early hours or working on weekends, that there's an expectation that, they'll be able to make up that time elsewhere, or come in late on Monday, or, head off to the beach early on Friday when their workload provides for it, I guess. But it's certainly a adrenaline-fueled fun over in agency land, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Sam, when you started your own agency, it has been quite some time now. I mean, what are the early challenges that you faced starting your own agency is no mean feat, in the sense that you wear multiple hats, like we discussed. I mean, while you're a business owner, you do finance, you do HR, you do, books, you do hiring, you're involved in, and probably everything that kind of moves the needle for the agency, right? So how difficult was it to land first few clients, ensure the deliverables are out on time and the quality is being met? And then also kind of building a team. What are the challenges? How did you overcome them?
How long is the show again? It's interesting. One of the things, obviously when you work in agencies, you get exposed to a lot of startups, and I've spoken to so many startups over the years. And what struck me was that as a startup, my agency wasn't too different to the agency I worked in before that. And, I was pretty comfortable with a lot of the work, at least 50% or 60% of what I was required to do was just more or less what I was doing previously. And it was still tremendously challenging. So, I'm always surprised at people who, quit their day job and then go and start a restaurant or something, or start something in a field that they know nothing about. Because I think had I not been able to, at least for a portion of my job, lean back on skills that I developed over the years that I was very comfortable with, and they were selling and client services and delivering things and reporting and all these sort of, the fundamentals, I guess, of what you need to provide to your client were, well rehearsed and practiced, and I was very good at. So, and I think that was good because I underestimated so many other things. I underestimated all those things you mentioned, the HR, the finance side of it. My sums were all completely wrong on, how many clients we'd need. We didn't charge appropriately in those early days. There were a lot of, there were a lot of learnings that, and I remember even when I had the first success of, wow, I'm now making as much money as I was earning in my job. And then I realized, oh, hold on, no, there's all these taxes I have to pay and all these kinds of things. So I think, there was obviously a learning curve. And then we bootstrapped, started as a single person agency with some assistance from some co-collaborators, and then, had to scale, I guess, to, still not a large agency. We're still a boutique, small agency, but, 15 employees that we are today. And of course, all the way along there, the hiring challenges and the process challenges and the challenges of moving from me doing all the work to other people doing all the work and trying to maintain those standards and all the things that agencies go through, I think, in their journey.
I kind of, resonated when you said about charging for your services. That is so complicated when you're starting out, right? And you either undercharge or you overcharge. You never price it right in the first go. I mean, we had a really successful campaign, and we were like, we made it. Now we should charge way more higher than ideally we should, and then fallen flat. So yeah.
It's an interesting one though. Like I give this advice to startups all the time. Like, at the end of the day, when I started this agency, and I made the jump, right? Like I quit my job, I made the leap. I was on a pretty there's a pretty big contract that I was tied to that stopped me from contacting any of my old clients, and wasn't going to do that anyway. So it was a blank page, and the way I looked at it was, well, I've got 60 hours a week of potential work time and I have to fill it with something. So who cares what people pay? It's, let's just get whatever business we can get. And there's a trade-off there as well, I think, for people to take punt on a brand new agency, they need to get a really good price, right? And they need to get, and I think those early clients, I hope anyway, what they got was a very experienced marketer that was doing, work for a fraction of the cost of what they would have had to get if they hired a more established agency or a more, or an internal person. But then, of course, over time, you've got to correct that. And once those hours are filled, you've got a problem there if you've got too many clients that aren't paying enough. It's always a difficult balance, pricing appropriately and also making sure that you deliver much more value than you take.
Nice. And talking about your agency, BizWisdom, give us a strategy behind branding yourself with that name.
Yeah, well, there's a question. Strategy might be too strong a word. Again, when I started this, arguably maybe there were better ways to do it. But when you bootstrap a business, I've been exposed to so many startups that, had spent 6-12 months making the perfect website, doing it, and then realized that they didn't have product market fit. So I knew really early that the most important thing for me was product market fit. So I picked up a name and a logo that was sitting around from some other, idea that for one of my wife's, potential businesses, and said, that'll do. And I deleted the website and I put up a digital marketing website on that. And I said, all right, great. Now we've got a website. That took about 2 days, not 6 months. And then I went out trying to win customers. So look, in hindsight, I think it's a cute name, BizWisdom. I don't know.
It is.
Yeah, we have been through one rebrand since that time, and that's when we were an established business, and we went back and said, okay, now that we know who we are as an agency, what do we need to do with our brand? So that was the role. Whether that's the right way to do it, I'm not sure. It was certainly in line with the sort of scrappy entrepreneurial spirit that the agency was started. I think maybe the downside of starting a business that way is BizWisdom still the name that I would choose today? Does that represent us? And of course, it's always risky to rebrand as well, because you give away all that goodwill that's been built up. Interestingly, a big part of our business is actually working with not-for-profits. So even having biz in our name sometimes is a bit of a strange thing, actually. But also I think a name is what you make of it, right? And it's about your reputation and what you deliver. And, any name's a good name when people know who you are and people have a lot of trust in what you deliver.
Nice. Finally, you also got your own podcast, Brandwidth. Tell us more about it.
Yeah, so really, really privileged to get to run Brandwidth. It's certainly one of the highlights of my role, and I get to sit down, every month. We release our episodes fortnightly, more or less, but we record them in 2 episodes at a time each month. So I sit down with Dean Milson from Demarca Brand Agency, who are a wonderful agency that have got been around for many years in Australia and a huge reputation. He's a director there. But Dean himself is one of the smartest smartest brand minds I've ever had the privilege of knowing. So, to get to sit down with him, and the concept of the show is not an interview style. I think there's lots of interview styles and they're great, but we wanted to sort of do something a little bit different. So we sit down together, the two of us, and the idea is, I guess we're a sort of odd couple of sorts. We both work in the broad marketing world, but I'm a digital marketing guy, running performance ads and buying media and doing all these kinds of things. And he's, a brand guy doing brand strategy and, unpacking what drives brands and, all of that great stuff. And so the idea is each episode, one of us brings a topic and then the other person has no idea what that topic is, and we sort of respond from our standpoint. It's been great. It's gone for a number of years, and I think I've certainly become a better marketer, I think, from sitting there with someone of his ilk and discussing some topics that maybe wouldn't otherwise find their way to my desk in the performance marketing world that I'm in. And I think if I could speak on his behalf too, that he's had very similar impacts of, understanding that sort of performance marketing world and adjusting the way he thinks about brands and, becoming maybe more pragmatic as a result. So it's been a lot of fun, and we've covered some great topics, I think.
Lovely. Good, Sam, this has been a great conversation. And before I let you go, you have been in the space for more than 2 decades now. Any particular advice you'd want to give to our young listeners who are starting out or, kind of trying to make the mark or start out on their entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, probably I'd say, beware the digital marketing guru or the marketing guru. I think marketing, largely because it's so unregulated, and I think that's a good thing. Regulation can be a real handbrake to creativity, but a lot of false prophets out there, I think, and as marketers, I think we tend to be very much attracted to the new shiny object. The old joke in marketing is if you want to sell your services, you tell everybody that the old way is dead and it won't work anymore. The only way is the brand new way, and you have the secrets to that new way, and you go out and sell it. And for sure, it probably does sell a lot of marketing, but I don't think it's true. So, if there's a young marketer standing out there, it's very easy to fall into the trap of thinking the old ways don't work, that's outdated, it's all about this or that or whatever the new hype thing is. But, the reality is that all media is good media. And for sure, media has become more fragmented over the years. And so it is harder. I'm sure to some degree it was easier when, you only had to buy the print ad and run the TV commercial and you're all good. Although I'm sure it wasn't that simple either. But, thinking about your audience, remembering that you are not your audience. As soon as you start working in marketing or advertising, your opinion of why someone should buy a product, becomes tainted with your expertise in the area. You're not a regular person, you're a marketer. So, remember to think about who your audience is, how do they consume media, what do they do, what are their pain points, what are their problems, and challenge everything. And chances are, if everyone else is doing something, it's probably a bad idea.
Absolutely. Thank you for that insightful session and the piece of advice at the end of it, Sam. I really appreciate you taking out time and doing this with us. Thank you, man. Cheers.
Thanks, Ranmay. It's been a real pleasure.